Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. Hello. For this episode, I spoke to Parth. Parth is the co-author of a book called Swipe to Unlock, The Insider's Guide to Tech and Business Strategy. He is also a product manager at Facebook. And in this session, we've talked about product strategy and how it differs to product management. This is a super useful session if you want to know how buying or making a new tech product, like an app, fits into the general strategy of a company. This episode is an excerpt of a live session that we had for Tech for Non-Techies members. I hope you find it useful.
Love this book. I recommend it in the Tech for Non-Technical Founders course, which will be running again in September. But, Parth, why don't you tell us why you wrote it and who you wrote it for?
Yeah, of course. So way back when, I think it's been like 3 years now since we published that book, but I'm a product manager at Facebook now, but I started my career as a product marketer. I actually have never taken a single computer science class. I'm completely non-technical in the traditional non-coding sense. And so I was about to start a new job as a product manager at Facebook. And so I was hoping to, before I started working directly with engineers every day, become more tech literate and able to communicate with engineers. And so I wanted to read something that would help me kind of ramp up essentially on how can I fluently converse with engineers, understand the high level concepts so I can make better technology decisions when I'm building products. And I scoured Amazon for 30 minutes and I couldn't find a single useful book. Everything's here's how you learn how to code. Here's here's how operating systems work. But there's nothing high level to help you understand how do I fluently converse with engineers? How do I understand the trade-offs? How do I learn the difference between what's front end and back end? What are all of these core lessons and concepts that I need to know to work in the tech space, to work with engineers without actually going into the code itself. And so when I couldn't find it, I'm there's no way that I'm the only person who has this need. And so I started talking to a couple of my friends from Microsoft at the time. And I was what do you guys think of this idea? Do you guys know any good resources? Because they both studied computer science. And they're yeah, I'm surprised that nothing like this kind of exists. It's such a common need. And people often come to engineers of yeah, I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? And certain engineers are pretty good at explaining technical concepts. A lot of them struggle because they just are used to conversing with other people who are technical, and often feel frustrated when product managers and other people don't understand the high level concepts. So they're we totally think this is useful. We'd that would be a helpful resource. And the more I talked to them, I started figuring out that they kind of felt this was a need on their side as well, because they didn't study business. Of they will be building these products but not completely understand the strategy behind them, or the bigger level decisions that at the CEO level or at the director level, those decisions that are being made. So an example I often use is Amazon charges in the States $99 a year for Prime, even though their shipping costs are closer to $180 a year now. So it's why are we bleeding money on this? What is the bigger picture strategy here? And so as we were kind of writing this book, we actually kind of wrote it once and then rewrote it, because it was first just technical concepts, but it didn't really answer the why. And I felt that intuition, even if you're a business major, it's still hard to know for all of the core products, what are all of these strategy decisions being made at these big companies. For instance, a couple years ago, the FBI approached Apple of hey, I think it was one of the California shootings. Like the shooter's iPhone was locked, and they needed to unlock it to see if there were other associates, other things planned, all of that sort of stuff. And so the FBI went to Apple. It's like, we need you to start like putting a backdoor, so like when these things happen, like we can actually like apprehend these people and find these insights sooner. And Apple completely refused to do that. And so it's like, what's the strategy here? Like on paper, it's like, oh, we want to help the government find potential terrorists. Like it seems like a patriotic, helpful thing, but like it completely goes against what most tech companies stand for. Because like I think like what people, especially as a new grad, like what I didn't think through, but like now, like as we get like older and more senior, like the things that you have to take into consideration are like, if you put in a backdoor for the US government, think about Apple, their second biggest market. And so I think over the next 10 years, their first biggest market is China. If the US has a backdoor, China will demand it in the future. And do you really want like right now, as given there's no backdoors to like find this user data, like these American hardware manufacturers kind of have that way to say there's no precedent. We don't do this even for America. We're not going to do it for China. But the second you bend to one government, you're going to have to do it for all. And if there is some sort of backdoor exploit, no matter how good of a job you do to make it secure, there's always a much greater probability that someone will be able to crack into it than being able to create one from scratch. And so it just like dilutes the whole security of the product. And so like the book is focused on cases like that kind of help give that like strategic framing of why things matter, why and how companies make the decisions that they do. And so we found like we didn't expect for it to grow this popular of a book, but like it's been like now like Google and Microsoft give this book to like all their new interns, and that's really helped seed our growth. And I think like Quora and Uber have this like as like a CEO recommended read for like they give it to like their new hires and stuff. And so it's been really cool to see like all these different companies and universities embracing the book. One of the things that I think kind of makes it unique from other books is we had like offers to publish with a lot of the big publishers, but we decided to self-publish instead, because what that allows us to do is to have a print-on-demand model where we can, like, if we wanted, every like 5 days, we could update the manuscript. And so like we try to every few months just like update the content just to keep it as relevant as possible, and like introduce like what the newest and latest updates in the tech world. Like for instance, now I think one of the most interesting developments in the tech world is the things that are happening with nationalism in these emerging markets, as well as the US, with like India banning like all Chinese apps essentially. Which is like kind of a scary thing when you think about it, right? Like as like what this kind of lends to is like the balkanization of the internet, of like China already kind of has like their own version of the internet, like these Western apps that are super popular, like Facebook, like Chrome, like Google Maps, like all of these sort of things. Like in China, they have their own like version of it.
I guess what you're going into, as far as I'm concerned, is product strategy. Last week, we had a talk on product management. So before you start delving into product strategy, it would be really useful for us to know what is the difference between product management and product strategy. Because surely to be a product manager, you need to have a strategy. But what you're talking about, like nationalization of the internet, that's way beyond product management, but the two of them kind of fit together.
Yeah, so I think of product management as the process of working with like engineers, designers, data scientists to create a product and like kind of iterate on it to finding product market fit. So like I think that's kind of like after you have kind of like a vision or goal of like, we want to play in this space. Like we see like as Facebook, maybe we see that TikTok is a growing trend. We want to make sure that we have competitive products like that can kind of fit that use case of shorter form content, video content with a lower like editing bar, such that anyone can create like almost Vine style content. But when I think of product strategy, I think of like, what is this like overarching mission or like bigger picture user needs that like we think will be really important in the future. Like, I think a great example of product strategy is when Facebook acquired Oculus. Of like, I think the product strategy there is Facebook, we own Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, like all of these pillars of communication around the world. But like in the future, like apps may not be the dominant way we converse. Like we might be moving towards a more immersive form of communication and social interaction in the form of virtual reality. And so like I think that's a great example of product strategy of like acquiring Oculus was essentially Facebook realizing that this may be the future of communication. And so we need to have a presence on that and not just be a Me Too product such as like Google Plus. Like when VR and AR become like a dominant form of communication and social interaction, we want to have a meaningful way of doing like a meaningful our own experience. And so like I think product strategy is like defining that like this may be important in the future, and that we as our company the people problem that we are solving is creating meaningful social interaction and community, but that may switch from websites and apps to virtual reality and augmented reality. And so like that conscious decision to pursue that is the product strategy. Once you have like, okay, like that's kind of like a good segue into that the piece of build, borrow, buy actually of once you decide that, I think the strategy is kind of like, okay, do we want to build this from scratch? Do we want to buy someone in the space like Oculus, or do we want to try to license content or like create some sort of strategic partnership? And the route that Facebook decided to go is we want to acquire Oculus. And so like in that case, I think the reason that Facebook wanted to go that route is because Oculus already had a lot of technology, and more importantly, they had a team of really smart and motivated and people who are all already passionate about virtual reality. So by acquiring Oculus, you essentially kickstart your efforts in this space. There are already competitors like Leap and others who are playing in this space. So like starting from scratch would mean essentially that you need to like try to acqui-hire a team or poach them with very lucrative offers. But if you can keep the founding team who already has like a strong vision and bring them on board and integrate some of the cool things that Facebook offers, like top of funnel and these like deep linking within our core apps like Facebook Messenger, that could be a very compelling sell to founders, because they don't have this distribution or like this scalability of like Facebook is a proven platform that can support billions of users. So like those are some of the like challenges that they're going to face as they scale.
Product management is literally making a thing. So, or the management of making a thing, making an app or making an algorithm, whatever that is. And product strategy is we're essentially thinking, how is whatever we're attempting to do, how is that going to look like in the future? So in Facebook's world, that's about communication and community. So then you're thinking that, okay, product strategy is what will communication look like in the future? So what will people be using? And then you make decisions based on that. Who is going to be working on product management and who's working on product strategy? Are these different people? Because to me, it sounds like product strategy, that's basically the executive team, so CEO, but the CEO needs some help. So would it be a bunch of M&A people? Is it going to be a bunch of McKinsey consultants? Or is it going to be people who used to work on product management who've risen up? So what's your experience on who is working on what?
Yeah, so product strategy, I think it really depends on how the company's culture is set. So some companies are very top down, where it'll be heavily just the executive team of like the C-suite and CEO. I think what I've really liked about Facebook is like it's a very like bottoms up culture. So like anyone can help influence product strategy. At Facebook, we have a saying that's data wins arguments. A common laptop sticker that you'll see at Facebook is like data greater than opinion. If you find data behind it, if you're like even an intern, right, like you can get a lot of support and like discussion around that idea. And if other people believe in it, like their product manager, it'll kind of go up the chain. New grad PMs who have pitched ideas, which have led to like small acquisitions, because the team just kind of feels like it would kickstart their progress.
I can see that we've got a few aspiring product managers here, and I'm assuming that some of them would be thinking, okay, well, this product strategy bit, that sounds really exciting. So how do I get to do that? Because maybe I want to work on product strategy and advise the CEO on what companies to buy, rather than actually think about, oh, how do we lift up our 3-month retention, which is far more boring than, that basically blue skies thinking. Because, thinking is always much more fun than doing, in my experience. So what would you say to somebody like that? Would you say to somebody like that, like, okay, just, go to business school and become a strategist? Or would you say to that person, actually, no, you can't get to the blue skies thinking bit until you have at least been an intern at Facebook and worked on product, because you're talking about product managers who are suggesting ideas. And what I'm asking is it possible to bypass that bit and just go straight to the strategy?
Yes, I think it's like a really interesting like push and pull there of like with product strategy. Like I think it's like super interesting. We have like a team called product strategy that's like ex McKinsey, BCG, and Bain consultants for the most part. But like I actually see traffic moving the other way of people going from product strategy into product management more so than the other way around. Which is like really interesting, right? Because I think what you'll find at many tech companies is we have these product strategy teams, but it's similar to consultants in which you put out an idea, but like you can be really passionate about it and have data around it. But like, I think a lot of people will have very strong opinions and vision around like, here is like the problem space and here's exactly what we need to go to win. But like the product manager essentially gets to decide what to do. Like they get to shape, like we want to go and like we think stories are like a big trend right now and we see a lot of growth and here's the data for it. And then it's like, okay, like we should focus on stories. But like the product manager, once they're given like a charter of like go increase social engagement and lower the bar for sharing, because like let's say we find on Instagram people aren't sharing because they think like their post isn't good enough and we just like it's just too much social pressure. Essentially the product manager will have the say on like how to go about doing it. If there's a lot of data around stories, they might pursue that path. But like the ex-consultant might have like a really clear vision of like, here's exactly what we need to go to do and win. And so like what you kind of lose, it's almost like you're a consultant again. Like you get to put out like this proposal, but someone else will get to ultimately decide how to do it and if to do it. And that's the product manager. So like I think like the best balance of like execution and strategy is like as you get more senior, like say like a product director, you get to influence a lot of strategy, but you get to own more of like the vision as well than being on the actual product strategy like team.
Interesting. So now let's talk about build, borrow, or buy. How would they make a decision whether they want to build, buy, or borrow, which is, copy basically for everyone else?
I think like the big things to consider like with build, borrow, and buy is like what are your goals and what is your timeline, I think are the big considerations. So like the thing that's really useful and like how important is it for us to own this end to end? Like is this something that's critical to our business, or is this just like a need that we need to solve? I think a good example there is like for Apple, like most of like they do a lot of their own technology, but like for instance, like screens, they actually get their screens from Samsung. A lot of times they might even like come and like they've designed them, but they just don't have the manufacturing capacity, and they go to these like competitors and like have them like do the manufacturing themselves. And what they might find is that like this isn't actually critical to our business. Like we're not a screens company. Like people aren't buying iPhones for the screens. Like the flagship Samsungs actually have higher density OLED displays. People come to iPhone because they trust the software, they trust the the privacy features, they like the brand, it syncs up to their MacBook, all of these things. And Apple strategically decides like it's not worth us having our own screens factory. Like Samsung's already making all of these TVs and other components, and like they're actually ahead of us in terms of like figuring out what the next big thing in OLED screens is.
What about when you actually do want to own something end to end because it is a key competitor? So maybe like Snapchat.
I think Facebook has done a really good job of making like strategic acquisitions. Like we bought Instagram when it still only had like 1 million users. We bought Oculus pretty early on. We bought WhatsApp when it was actually pretty large. And I think like back in the day, there was an offer floated to Snapchat around $3 billion to acquire it while it was still like up and coming. And Evan Spiegel famously turned down that acquisition offer. At the time, he was called crazy for turning it down, but now Snapchat's worth a lot more than $3 billion. So that was a good call. At the time, though, I think $3 billion was like a pretty fair offer, just given the number of users. But like the thing was like, when we bought Instagram, like what we were actually getting was that this was a very mobile first company and Facebook was traditionally a website. So our web experience was like much stronger than our app experience. And what we were seeing is there's this growing trend of people moving to mobile. And so we're bringing two things on board. We were buying the arguably best mobile social app, but we were also bringing that expertise of creating a world-class mobile experience in social to help improve the Facebook mobile experience.
Can I just break that up? So basically we're thinking about product. So Facebook wants the Instagram product, so the thing, but Facebook also wants the expertise of the people who made the thing.
Exactly.
Is that right? So that's why they made that decision. Okay.
I think a third component there was like it was rumored that Google and Twitter were also considering it as an acquisition, as both companies saw this as like a big space, like mobile plus social. Then take WhatsApp, which is a very different acquisition. This was like $19 billion. It's already had hundreds of millions of users.
But no money.
What?
But no money. So it wasn't monetized.
So there was, I think back in the day, WhatsApp was like 99 cents to download per year or something like that. Yeah. So a little bit of money, but trivial amount of money. Yeah. So like the thing with apps like WhatsApp, like building something like WhatsApp would actually be pretty straightforward. It wasn't like the technology that was like really strategically valuable. But if you looked on a map of the number of Facebook users and just like maybe colored the countries where like more than 40% of people are on Facebook or 50% of people are on Facebook, what you'd find is that the countries that all of the ones where we had big gaps were WhatsApp countries. And so like this was to help close that geographic gap of like user penetration in markets like India, a lot of Africa, a lot of Latin America, where Facebook isn't as big. WhatsApp is huge. It's the dominant form of communication. And so we weren't really buying the app as we were as much as like getting access to that user base that traditionally isn't on the family of Facebook applications. And so it was pricey, but it essentially got us the next generation of internet users where WhatsApp is the dominant form of communication.
So far we've had reasons for acquisition, which is buying the thing. So somebody has created an interesting thing. And because they've created this interesting thing, we also then want to buy the team. So that's the second factor. And then the third factor is they have these users, which we don't have.
If you want to hear the rest of the session where we discuss product strategy and technology M&A with examples from Facebook and Microsoft, then sign up to become a Tech for Non-Techies member. As a Tech for Non-Techies member, you'll be able to get access to all of our live events where you can ask your questions. You also get learning notes on each episode and monthly office hours with me and access to the unique Tech for Non-Techies community. The link to the membership is in the show notes. And if you found this episode useful, which I hope you did, it will be super helpful if you gave us a rating and a review. If you do that, then this podcast is going to be more easily discovered by other people like you who also want to learn about the tech sector. Thanks for listening and speak to you soon.